Thanks. Hopefully everybody had a good lunch, and welcome to this very important session on alignment opportunities between AUTOSAR and COVESA. Geneva and COVESA have a long history of working with AUTOSAR or collaborating with AUTOSAR. We have a lot of joint members who care about the AUTOSAR platform as well as the Geneva/COVESA platform and the deliverables. And so this session, I think, is going to be exploratory and informative because there may be some new alignment opportunities between these organizations that have not been there before. And so that's a little bit about what we may be talking about today. And I'm sure that Michael's presentation is going to spur some questions, and so we'll have a Q&A period at the end. But I'd like to welcome Michael Niclas from AUTOSAR, a deputy chairperson of the AUTOSAR Steering Committee. In his role there, he's also a employee of Continental and can tell you a lot about that as well. So I'll give the mic over to Michael. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. As Steve has said, we have been working together for quite a while. I mean, when I was chairperson 3 years ago, we met first time, and since then we're constantly talking to each other. Steve will show up in the AUTOSAR conference in May, so I return the favor. I show up here, and I would really be glad to give you the first audience ever to talk with you about how AUTOSAR will and plans to change in this context of the software-defined vehicle. Because as similar like COVESA, also in the AUTOSAR Executive Board, AUTOSAR Steering Committee, we said, okay, we need to adjust to the situation. We need to think about what kind of role does the standard play in the ecosystem in the future. And so I'm very glad today to show you our proposition. As Steve said, this is a Q&A thing. So I'm really happy if there's also some feedback. What do you think about it? How do you see that? And secondly, I also want to highlight the first concept that we are doing where we are basically making AUTOSAR compatible to the VSS. So where we work together with colleagues from Theater Every and other Geneva and COVESA and AUTOSAR partners to bring things forward. All right. So I don't know if this one works. Doesn't look like. It seems to be unplugged. We'll fix that really quick. That's good that I still have some technical background. As Steve introduced me, this is basically my profile. Thanks a lot. And let's talk about that alignment opportunities. And this is, as I said, it's more the discussionary part. What additional alignment opportunities do you see? But from our perspective, where do we come from in the automotive industry? And AUTOSAR especially. We have significantly grown in the past years. So you can see how the membership developed in AUTOSAR. So we have currently 330 AUTOSAR members. And of the top 22 selling brands in 2019, 21 are AUTOSAR members and apply it in their systems. So the only one that is grayed out is the obvious American one that made an other approach compared to the classic automotive industry, understandably. And we're all trying to copy that in the future, as far as I understood. And this is where we stand today. So we have a huge responsibility for the ecosystem automotive, I would say, as a standard organization. Similar as COVESA has also a huge responsibility in the automotive landscape. So taking that, we have seen in the past some has been called disruptions. And I also would confirm these are disruptions. So if you have seen different kind of things popping up, CARIAD being founded, an MBUS being announced, we have also ARENE being announced, we have also BMW, Volkswagen, Daimler stating for a common operating system. And what happened, these are all news flashes. So what the non-automotive engineer also was capable of reading in newspapers and so on. And there are reactions in the market, right? So if there is a disruption, there's also a reaction. So what we see at the moment that organizations like the Eclipse STV are popping up. also organizations like SOFI, and also a lot of organizations adopt, right? So like COVESA, also AUTOSAR needs to adopt. So when we look at that, you can look at it for different angles. For example, here we see we had made an analysis, where are we? When we talk about hierarchy, value stream, different layers, we've also said what kind of technology need to interact, how do we do this with DevOps. There might also be, if you map the standards to a generic SDV architecture, there might be some allocation where which standard organization contributes to. It's a non-exhaustive example. It's a very poor mapping done by me, so if it's wrong, please apologize. And that means simply, it's an industry challenge. The software-defined vehicle is an industry challenge. It's not the challenge of a single OEM, of a single company, and it's also not the challenge of a single consortium. We have in AUTOSAR other expertises than colleagues have in COVESA. And we need to align on our borders. And this is also where we see a little bit later what we have started in the collaboration between AUTOSAR and COVESA. And in the discussion, of course, we can also talk about other opportunities you see in the future. Having that said, we also want to open up. So we have an opening strategy. It's the first audience to hear that ever outside of the AUTOSAR core partners. So very proud to be here. And we have several layers that we are planning. So first of all, we have with the core partners a very small crowd of people controlling AUTOSAR, and we are opening this up with the Premium Partner Plus program. I'll talk about it on the next slide, so it will give more opportunities for AUTOSAR partners to influence the standard. Then the second one is, we have in our contracts a clause about derived applications. So it's okay to use AUTOSAR for derived applications. It's not okay to use it for military, ultra hazardous, and so on. There's always been the question, where's the border? So what we are doing now is we will create a positive catalog. So where companies said, okay, I want to use AUTOSAR for this and that kind of industry. Is this okay or not? So this is what we also want to plan to support the AUTOSAR partners, not to put them in risk with respect to in which industry they apply the AUTOSAR standard. And last but not least, we want to enable the collaboration with non-AUTOSAR partners, mainly startups, universities, and open source organizations. This comes with certain things we need to achieve. First of all, we would like to make AUTOSAR compatible to the vehicle API concepts like VSS and so on. And this will be in open source. So there's not the intention that we want to put this in the AUTOSAR IP as it is today, but we want to put it in an open space, because this is essential for use case outside of the automotive domain, like for example, use cases around the open insurance network, for example, and so on. The second is, also, at the moment, it's quite confusing. We have a lot of bus specifications like SAMA, DLT, which are in the AUTOSAR consortium. They're also have been created in Geneva, have been brought in back and forth. And we need to open up that essential IP, right? So on the bus level compatibility, we also need to make sure that this bus level compatible specifications are open to everybody. Yeah. We will talk about that later. Then the third step is that we also want to dual license and open the specifications that are interfaced by applications, for example, that you can implement in an Eclipse SDV context or also in a COVESA context, an application based on AUTOSAR interfaces without being able to be AUTOSAR member. That's very crucial, because up so far this is not working. So this is the intention. Of course, this requires legal changes. So I cannot tell you whether we will achieve all of the roadmap, we will see later on, but we are heavily pushing towards that. So this is our goals. So let's talk first about the Premium Partner Plus program. So with the Premium Partner Plus program, we have already a first contract available. It's currently in legal review. We want to be able to onboard Premium Partners Plus in 2022. The Premium Partners Plus will influence the standard technically in the project leader team. So there's no limit, no application boundary. So like previously with a strategic partnership, we have announced, so this is open for everybody to join as long as the obligations are fulfilled. And then you can also influence from the project leader team the work in AUTOSAR and better influence it into the technical direction you need. So we will do this in 2022 with amendments to the agreement, and later on, 2023, we will roll it out into the standard contracts. Yeah, so this is the Premium Partner Plus. Yes, this is basically why it's Premium Partner Plus. Because, I mean, you will stay Premium Partner, so legally your contract as Premium Partner doesn't change, but you get additional rights and additional obligations. And this is where the plus comes from. Yeah. Of course, the next part which I've been talking about was this derived applications. So as I mentioned at the moment, AUTOSAR in principle allows the usage in non-automotive domains, yes, with excluding ultra-hazardous and military applications. And what we see is, and for example, also in the ZVEI, it's a German group of suppliers, and they also ask questions, always come up with questions. I have here a FTOL use case, so electric vertical takeoff and landing, a small drone for 2 passengers, a package to deliver with drones, and so on. Is this now aircraft stuff, or is this rather something I could also supply with AUTOSAR issues? And this is what we want to support, because these questions get more and more asked. So today, we want to create this catalog of derived applications, as I mentioned before, examples where we think it's not a problem to apply AUTOSAR for, and we have basically in the plan to make such a positive list. Yeah, what we have already seen as positive use cases is, for example, shipping, railway, medical, agricultural, home automation, household appliance, industrial automation, mobility infrastructure, civil drones, light unmanned aircraft systems, like I mentioned, and this FTOL use cases. And of course, this is feedback session. So what's your application? Do you know other applications that are derived applications from automotive where such standard is necessary or not? Yeah. And that's been the, I would say, more legal and organizational beef. Now we go to the more technical stuff, or the relevant stuff for, yeah.
You may have some of your partners who are already premium partners, and they ship a successful stack. Does this entering of the Plus program have any obligations with regards to the stack and opening up the stack as well?
No. So the IP rights are basically unchanged. It might change because of the later parts in the presentation, but it will, also there's no intention at all to make any partners giving up their existing implementations, right? So we all talk about opening up specifications so that compatible implementations like an AUTOSAR application in an STV context, for example, can be developed open source, and then once you commercialize it, and we come to that in the dual license principle, then you have to get AUTOSAR partners, which give the benefit. Yeah. Yeah. We had a lot of, we have a long history with conformance tests. Yeah. So what we have in AUTOSAR internally, we have in the AUTOSAR adaptive a demonstrator which does the verification of the specifications, where we have some system tests, but at the moment we don't have a conformance test suite where there's a stamp to say, okay, you are now an AUTOSAR supplier. Usually this is handled by the market. I mean, we have the same companies use different stacks, and this usually helps to harmonize things and also to get feedback to the standard, what specification-wise not compatible. Yeah. Okay, good. Then thanks for the question. On this opening strategy, so the vehicle API, which I've been mentioning, the intention is here not to create our own new vehicle API. The intention is to make AUTOSAR compatible with existing vehicle APIs, with existing vehicle interface approaches, like, for example, the VSS. And the intention is, how do we want to do that? We want to publish what we do in this area openly, as I mentioned. And then, of course, we can have feedback loops in the public, and then we can make a new official release from AUTOSAR, right? And the intention is really this compatibility. And in this area, Piotr from Tieto and also Pavel are supporting. And here we have the vehicle API concept. So it's an AUTOSAR concept where we want to make this compatible. We have here, I'm not the technical expert, so there is a question I will hand over to Piotr. But we have in principle here an external gateway, which handles the connection to the external. And we do a mapping of the services that are in the vehicle, so of the EE architecture part, to the stuff which is external of the vehicle, to allow an automatic translation. So you can basically then connect your VSS velocity at the end of the day to which some IP address your velocity is coming from that you want to match to the external cloud interface. The VSS is one example. We also want to support others like mentioned here, VHAL. VSC is most likely one of the next topics then when it's standardized. And this should be a framework where we can hook in different other cloud concepts to make sure that the EE architecture in the network gets compatible with the Internet of Things, which is not driven by the automotive domain, but where the automotive domain needs to be compatible with, right? And the data mapper I already explained roughly. So the Lattice Discussions is here that we have in the gateway that you have seen in the top here, a dedicated network API to translate also the topics in the vehicle domain. We have also currently investigations how much we can automatically convert that VSS VSC syntax to ARACOM. And also the gateway should be accessible from within the vehicle to provide the same data in the vehicle again. The concept will also extend the VSS format to allow ARACOM services in the external visibility. And this is an internal number, so sorry about that. But the vehicle API concept will describe the way of the translation of VSS to MQTT, which we are using for proof of concept protocol. And of course, this is not exclusively, but it should be set up in such a way that you can use others. The roles and rights, there has been a discussion in the VSS slots before. This has not been defined yet. So who can access which data points? So I think we can also look into what I understand this morning, VISS, which already does some role and rights management. So there are two kind of work products. So AUTOSAR always works with work products that are planned to be delivered. The one is going to be this explanatory document that presents the idea, the technical caveats, etc. And also we want to include here, based on the initial feedback from the working group, some aspects of safety, also aspects with respect to roles and rights, and also aspects with respect to methodology. But additionally, we're also implementing a proof of concept using the adaptive platform demonstrator, and where we want to show that the protocol-specific adapters that are feasible. It should contain statically manual bindings between VSS and ARACOM to show that this mapping in principle is possible. Also I mentioned MQTT to talk to others outside of a QEMU instance. And of course, tooling is one of the topics we still need to look into, how to translate that. We have seen that before. So this is basically where we actively collaborate today between COVESA and AUTOSAR via joint members. So being a member in both organizations is possible to translate that to a certain degree. All right, so this has been on the weekly API and what we are doing there. There's a question. So it is basically in the EE architecture like a kind of an external gateway intended. And you have basically then these translators which translate from one model description to another one, right? For example, between ARXML and VSS, or between ARXML and SWC, and also then do the code part, which does the translation code-wise between the function calls between A and B. Yeah. It could be a separate metal box or integrated somewhere. It will depend, of course, physically wiring your ways of having your wireless transceivers in the system and so on. Yeah. So I think this is not mandated by that concept. It's more about how you would apply that in principle. Yeah.
When you showed the blue boxes, AUTOSAR, is that both AUTOSAR Classic and AUTOSAR Active compatible?
I mean, the intention would be that this is some IP-based or service-based. So we have basically in AUTOSAR the XML, you have the service catalog, and the service catalog describes the services which are then initiated as either DDS or some IP services. So this is, to my understanding, more towards the adaptive platform from a description perspective, but it can also be translated to Classic if it is some IP, because you can support in AUTOSAR Classic static some IP communication. So where you have pre-known services, this is possible, but it's the Classic platform is built for PDU signal-based communication and slapping some Ethernet communication on top of that. There's several partners who have done that here in the room. It's an interesting thing, and it's more about making things compatible and not about natively supporting them nicely, right? So the native nicely support will be more with the adaptive platform. Yeah. All right, then we come to the opening. What I mentioned here is on the bus level, we need to be compatible. So at the moment, we would like to open the SAM IP and DLT. This is also, we would like to open, but we cannot just say as the 9 AUTOSAR core partners, let's open it, because the contracts don't allow that. We need IP clearance from all of the partners. So if you're AUTOSAR partners, stay tuned, there will be IP clearances for DLT and SAM IP. Of course, yeah, this is how things work, and this is what we need to do as a prerequisite to be able to open things up. Yeah. And this is, as mentioned before, there was this concern with the own software solution. It's not about the software solution, it's about the specification, the IP that was brought into the specification that has to be opened. It's not about the existing implementations, just to be clear and precise. All right, then for the interface LAN, I've drawn a very ugly circle on top of AUTOSAR Classic and Adaptive towards the application. We want to do a case-by-case dual licensing, as I mentioned before, for university, startups, and open source organizations, so that you can exploit, i.e. implement AUTOSAR applications in your open source framework, for example. And of course, here also we will need a IP clearance from the partners, where the partners say, okay, I'm okay to open that specification to dual licensing, meaning dual licensing would mean that as long as you're not selling any software with that, you're not mandatory to be AUTOSAR member. When you're selling then this as a part of your commercial product, then you should get AUTOSAR member, which of course eases the work with universities, it eases also the work for startups to make proof of concepts and so on. And this is what we promise ourselves from that activity. Some of you might also know that we have this AUTOSAR Adaptive demonstrator. So we have also an implementation of AUTOSAR Adaptive to verify our internal, our specifications internally. And we are also discussing if we want to dual license that also. So also we're looking a bit in the industry, what's the feedback, what do you think about, would it make sense to dual license that? That would mean that we open also the source code, that everybody can use it for free, as long as they don't have a commercial use case for that, like for example universities and open source organizations and so on. So this is under discussion. We don't have a final decision here, but we also want to have feedback from the market about that. So what do we do short term? So in 2022 we make amendments for the vehicle API, because this needs to be amended in a different IP policy. We need to make amendment for Premium Partner Plus. As I mentioned, this is quite far developed. We need an amendment in the catalog for derived applications. So long term, we need this IP clearance stuff, which takes a little bit longer, together with an according development agreement that will implement all these short-term changes in a future-proof way, I would say. And the statement I want to put here and start the discussion with is that we are looking for partners who want to shape the automotive development ecosystem and jointly tackle the challenges of the automotive industry, together with our more than 300 partners. So thanks for your attention. I think I want to repeat the sentence from the beginning. The SDV is not a challenge of one company or one consortium, but it's a challenge of the complete industry, and we need to talk to each other, we need to align, and we need to clarify responsibilities. Thanks a lot.
Okay, question and answer time. I would really appreciate it if we could do the questions through the mic so we can get it on the video, on the audio. So does anybody have a question for Michael? Okay.
As far as I have seen, the whole translation will take place via some IP, and no non-AUTOSAR applications will run on Aracom or something like that. So it might be planned to allow third-party applications to even run on Aracom when they are from non-AUTOSAR third parties.
Okay, I try to summarize the question once more. I mean, you've been asking if there is an application which is not from a non-AUTOSAR party, right? And it's running on Aracom, yeah. Like, I don't know, application of an insurance company. The dual licensing would not allow that this is running on Aracom without being AUTOSAR member, yeah. So that is the point. Except, I mean, we've been talking about the compatibility in the network thing, yeah, but the dual licensing will not allow to have a commercial exploitation of that. This is why all of the non-automotive use cases, we want to move to the vehicle API concept, so that all non-automotive use cases and membership is not relevant or not necessary. Because the internal EE architecture is basically then working on the automotive-based use cases. Yeah.
But when so perhaps they have, from my point of view, when we talk about a vehicle API, we have a common understanding about semantics and so on. And I don't care if it's Linux, if it's AUTOSAR below or not. What I've seen is I need a different operating middleware system to run the vehicle API, and I don't get why not running it natively on AUTOSAR. Just to, and I don't know if a startup has 90,000 euro with 5 FTE and so on. So, and this will hinder.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, you don't need to be Premium Partner Plus to be an AUTOSAR member. So to exploit it, it's an associate membership, which is a fraction of that and no FTE required, but you would be able then to, as a startup, use the AUTOSAR specification to implement your applications before it's commercially, so to say, put into the market. Of course, once you have your commercialization, you should be AUTOSAR member as according to the IP management, because we have all of the patents that AUTOSAR partners bring in are made available for free. So this is the caveat with the IP issue we have. It's a blessing and a curse, the IP clause of AUTOSAR, because it goes very much in the non-infringing area. As it's the blessing part. The curse part is, of course, if you want to open up something there, you have to talk to a lot of people. So, but the intention is to make the use cases which are not automotive with the support of the vehicle API, where the car is one item in the Internet of Things, and that should be definitely open.
Other questions?
Which existing real-world applications did you have in mind when you started your work on this opening? So, did you have any specific projects where you thought these would need AUTOSAR despite being non-automotive, perhaps?
I mean, for the opening, there are different aspects that come up. So first of all, of course, we are not, as COVESA, the experts when it comes to the topics like vehicle signal spec or the vehicle service catalog, but it makes sense that this service catalog is connected to what happens in the internal EE architecture of a vehicle. And that was the motivation for opening up in the direction of the vehicle, to say, okay, we need some compatibility in there, so we need to think about how do we get this compatibility and how should we license that. So do we make it proprietary as the other stuff, or do we make it open? That was one aspect. The other one is there are popping up initiatives like Sophie, Eclipse, STV and others. And we have also discussed with Ross in the past if they can make a adapter on ARACOM. This would be possible when we have implemented that. Such use cases that they can make their own applications, that they make a ROS adapter on top of ARACOM or whatsoever. That is in principle then developed in the open source organization. And once a company uses this open source implementation for commercial utilization, they usually have also then a commercial AUTOSAR adaptive product in place. So then they should need to be AUTOSAR member anyway. So that was the two main driven use cases behind that.
Thank you.
I wonder if you can clarify a little bit the time plan for publishing the vehicle API details. Since a lot of the things you mentioned have been, it would sort of fill some of the boxes that have been defined under the CVII initiative. And so they have been identified as things that are needed in the industry. And in order to avoid waiting or duplicated work, it would be good to know when these things will be made available.
That's a good question. There's an intention why we want to finish the legal topics for publishing vehicle API in 2022, because what is currently created, if we are able to finalize this until our AUTOSAR release, of course we would like to be able to also publish it there. So the legal framework to be able to publish stuff openly in the vehicle API has a target of 2022. Our release is usually November, so that would fit that we are able that first work results from Pavel's concept and Piotr's concept can make it into the next AUTOSAR release. But there is no guarantee, of course, because we have all of the reviews, we have all of the process clearings and so on. So this is, but the intention is to be able to do this within 2022.
Any other? Okay. No other questions? Then I think we can close, and I'd like everybody to thank Michael for the presentation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward also to have some discussions. Of course, I cannot answer all of the questions you might have, as I'm quite far away from the technical details, but I'm glad to help you out as much as possible. Thanks again.
And we're honored that you made this announcement here, so thank you for doing that. Yeah. Okay. So our next session, I believe, starts at 2:15. So we have a little bit of time here to mingle and grab a post-lunch coffee or glass of water. So thank you all for joining.